Hello and welcome to another episode of Thinking Critically, a D&D discussion. My name is Danilo, a D&D investigator, and I like all kinds of games and the crunchy mechanics that make them tick. I am also now available on Facebook and Instagram, so just have a search for Thinking Critically D&D and drop a little follow and like. The topic of today is emotion, and I'm joined by Manny, a.k.a. the Growed Up Geek. Thank you ever so much for coming on. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Manny. I'm a 42-year-old predominant dungeon master from the United States, and I've been playing D&D most of my life, dungeon mastering mostly, and I just feel like it's the part that I gravitate towards the most and have the most fun with, as well as I think a space for real discussion. Players are kind of a very personal thing, and Dungeon Master I think is like a much bigger, broader concept that should be discussed. It's a cool thing, and it's a big responsibility, and I think you owe it to your players and to yourself to do it right and have conversations like this.
Yeah, for sure. I've said on previous podcasts that there's a responsibility on both players and DMs, but for sure it's a different responsibility. There is one, but it's a different one.
Yeah, it's a relationship
Yeah.
that two people have or engage in, that everybody has their end. They're not the same, but everybody has a responsibility so that it's mutually beneficial.
Couldn't have put it better myself. And that's a really good start for the topic of today, which is emotion. So, what do you think of when you hear the word emotion within the D&D context?
Within D&D, I feel like it's this idea that everybody has maybe in the back of their minds, but I think it's a much bigger thing in all facets of the game than people really think about or maybe even acknowledge. That the motivation for anything is based on a feeling, feeling unsafe, get out of the way, all of these things. And I feel like everybody wants to do the cool thing, fight the dragon, defeat the lich. But I feel like the best Dungeons and Dragons comes from a much more emotional place. And that's what separates just playing Dungeons and Dragons and, oh, I slayed the dragon. Yeah, it was fun. And, oh man, it was amazing. And then you tell people about it. It's the emotion is what your catch is to really be invested and even express it outwardly that you felt this thing and you want to tell people about it.
Wow, we are really starting with some really juicy stuff. This is great. And you've touched on so many really good points there. So for starters, you've basically said it's a human experience, right? It's a bunch of humans playing together, and it's almost a microcosm of life in a way that you can't really get elsewhere. So you mentioned there about, people want to do the cool thing like kill the dragon, slay the lich, which is great, but you can do that in many, many, many video games where you're playing with or against a machine. So you're kind of lacking the human element there on the other side of the table. What D&D gives you is that the whole experience is inherently emotionally driven.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe it's a little easier to understand on the players and the player characters' end. You are personifying this person, paladin, cleric, whatever. And you personally have come up with this character. You are not, an actor on a TV show who is personifying a character that somebody in the writer's room came up. Yes, you're invested. It's your job, and you want to be, if you're Kit Harington, you want to be the best Jon Snow that you can. But to a certain extent, Jon Snow is not Kit Harington's character. Mm-hmm. It's George R.R. Martin's, filtered through the TV writers down to Kit Harington. Mm-hmm. Where with Dungeons and Dragons, your character is your own. You are the writer, executive producer, and the actor, in the grand sense, that brings that character to life. And the more invested you are in that character, you get down to not just, oh, my cleric can do this, that's really cool. You get into the nuts and bolts of who that character is. Mm-hmm. And your decisions as that character are made ideally in my world as the dungeon master made from an emotional place. You inhabit this character so much that its emotions motivate its/your actions. And you know, from a player, that's a little easier to understand, I think. From my perspective as the dungeon master, my goal is to put you in situations that will elicit an emotion. And, you know, you watch Critical Role or any of the bigger streamed games that they have clips on YouTube of crazy things that happen and their reactions. And even without context, if you see those, you watch this group of people have this crazy, spontaneous, natural reaction that you go, all right, these people are definitely invested in it emotionally for that reaction. And then from my perspective on the other side of the screen as the dungeon master, you know, in my own kind of maniacal puppet master way, my belief is I set these wheels in motion for you to have this reaction and this emotional outburst, if you will. And that's what I live for. You have lived that your character has achieved something or overcome something, and that's your emotional thing. Mine is watching the players do it. And at the end of the day, I think that kind of reaction and that moment is what and ideally I'd like to believe most dungeon masters live for. Not just, oh, I set this thing up, they chased down all the clues, they slayed the dragon, yay. But all the obstacles they overcame, how invested the players are. And the more everybody is invested emotionally into whatever you're doing, I have a hard time believing that that's not the best way to achieve the best end result of whatever it is that you're looking for.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you know, I always feel like you have to be so careful nowadays to say, you know, everybody's game's their own and so on and so on. But I completely agree with you, and I'm a strong proponent of, you know, get invested, because the more you put in, the more you'll get out. And those emotional payoffs, those gut punches, those tearjerkers are going to be what sets it apart from playing Diablo 3 on the couch, for example.
Like video games are an interesting example. Let's take something a little more RPG-ish, like Dragon Age, any of the Dragon Age games. Is there an inherent freedom similar to that of Dungeons & Dragons? Yes, kind of. But at the same time, your character choices, aside from aesthetically, usually, are limited. You're the mage, and your story is set by BioWare. And if the story that BioWare is telling hooks you, then, you know, good for you. I'm happy that they hit their mark with you, but that doesn't achieve it for everybody. You know, these characters I might not relate to. Granted, I can play 3 of them however I want, but even within the scope of what they've offered me, I'm not really emotionally invested. I'm a passenger on this thing. You know, I just get to watch it unfold where I help. But in Dungeons and Dragons, because it is so personal, that I feel like your investment into your character and its well-being and its achievements and everything should be almost a default starting point for players, people who are really into it. I mean, not everybody has to be super invested, and it's fine. If you just want to come out and roll some dice and talk with your friends, that's great too. You know, I have a couple of those guys in my group, and I'm glad to have them. They're my friends. We have a good time.
Yeah, you need that balance.
Yeah, and I have a couple of players in my group who are super invested. And when we started our campaign, because there was so many first timers, I told them, I was like, look, here's the deal. You know, gave them the big overview, you know, the selling points, and then said, now that we've established what this game is going to be and you have an idea of your character, you have the option. Do you want a super in-depth character arc in this campaign that I will work in? Yes, cool. I'm going to need ammo for that. So give me a backstory. And 2 of the guys did. 2 of them didn't. They were perfectly content, much more of a live in the moment kind of a thing. And, you know, at the time it was cool. And looking back on it, part of me wondered, oh man, are these guys going to be invested? They don't want an overarching story. They just want to live in the moment, whatever that means. And I know my entire group. We've been friends for years. Two of them I've known for 10 or more years.
Wow.
And so from knowing them personally outside of the context of Dungeons and Dragons, I knew these guys. I know what makes them tick. I know where I can poke at them to aggravate the person. And Dungeons and Dragons, the idea with your characters, you basically either play you or not you. Mm-hmm. And most of them played a heroic version of themselves, which is totally great. My character is a riff on myself. And so that helped me know what emotional buttons I could push with them, what was going to motivate them to do something, how I could, and this is going to sound kind of evil, but how I could knowingly manipulate their emotions into doing something that was against the best interests of their character because I know them as a person.
Yeah.
Give them money, they will do anything without thought of consequence. And that led to a whole thing where one of my players basically killed the only living family that he had left because he was presented with an opportunity to make money real quick with no work. And then with that comes, once it plays out, that his sisters had died from a poisoning in a horrible fashion. There was a genuine, emotional response from him. And I'd set it up. This wasn't an accident. But at the same time, he was so invested in that component of his backstory, knowing that he was the one who sabotaged it was emotionally devastating, maybe even unfairly so. The consequences of him being impulsive were probably a little harsh. And I got this genuine reaction. We had to take a break from the table. He had to go gather himself. And part of me goes, that was some great dungeon mastering. I elicited an emotion, a very visceral, strong one. That's what you want. But then the consequences thereof is that I manipulated a friend of mine into doing something that was going to hurt him, his character, and possibly even his enjoyment for the game, because I wanted this illicit emotional response. And it's a thing that even now we don't even really kind of joke about it.
Wow.
It's still a sore subject. And, I have to live with my end of it that like I said, I feel bad. I set a friend of mine up to do this. But on the other side that helps me sleep at night is he was so invested in his character and the character's needs at that moment that he did something against his character's probably better judgment and the player's better judgment because he wanted to see his character's emotional needs met. And, like I said, the consequences were awful and I do still feel bad about it. But like I said, executed better, I feel like that kind of scenario is what every dungeon master and player should want from their dynamic.
Yeah. It's difficult to do really well, I think. And I don't want to sound like I'm talking from experience or anything. This is all kind of speculation on my part, but it's easy to do really badly and difficult to do really well. So it's very easy to pull the rug out of your players as a DM. Funny enough, I think I was reading yesterday was about you should never... Everything should be foreshadowed. So you shouldn't have a trap which is just like the hill. The hills are alive and the players, if they fail a roll, the hill eats them and they die. That's no fun. But it's a piece of cake to orchestrate as a DM. You can do that the same way with kind of soft attacks, so emotional attacks. As it's a piece of cake to set up some contrived thing that causes the players to accidentally kill their kid or something like that, or something like a horrible, grim, nasty outcome. But to do it in a way that is the payoff is genuine, but isn't gonna make you lose sleep. It's probably one of the hardest things to do. Like setting up combat encounters can be tricky, but it's mechanical. It's maths at the end of the day. And
it's math.
Yeah, it's you can do it, but what isn't maths are humans and emotions. They're the opposite end of you can get any further away. So yeah, I envy you in a way, and I have set up a number of really long burn emotional payoffs. I just hope that will elicit a fraction of the response that your player got from the things that I've set up. You mentioned when we were talking about video games and Dragon Age and things like that, and you were saying about it can be potentially hard to get invested in those characters, because I'm thinking of more RPGs where you're playing more of a character that's like Deus Ex, for example. You're playing, I forget the name of the main character, but
cool haircut, sunglasses.
That's the dude. A cool dude. He's very flavorful. He's full of character. He's clearly a cyberpunk aesthetic kind of thing. So there, you're already limited with how invested you can get. Just like you said, I don't want to play a cool haircut, sunglasses, cyberpunk dude. I want to play something else. So even there's barriers to entry. But video games are kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't, because the alternative to that is making almost a silent protagonist, or someone who is just such a blank slate. So Fire Emblem is a good example of that. Awakening, where you're just playing some amnesiac who wakes up, who can...
how very JRPG.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think you've gone through some time portal or something and you're from the future, full-on JRPG tropes, but you're a blank slate, and they're literally like, oh, I don't know how I got here, and I don't know this world I am in, so I'm just a complete vanilla blank slate, which is great. In a way, the player can put their stamp on it, but you're so vanilla, it's kind of just like, to everything. How do you feel about this? Well, I don't know.
With the Deus Ex example, I think the hard, or the kind of double-edged sword with the investment, especially as far as that being, such an established character that doesn't get a lot of wiggle room, is that through the marketing and kind of everything about it, the people who are going to play it are the people who are that aesthetic, or however it's marketed, like appeals to.
Sure.
Before you play it that game is what you're about, and you're going to have a good time, and you inherit the character by default. With Deus Ex is kind of a niche game. When you got into things like Fire Emblem, which you said was, the opposite, that's and I don't want this to sound like in a bad way, but a very lowest common denominator of how you appeal to somebody. This person that you play could be anybody. So there's your starting point. That's why you're invested, is that you could be anything. But then as the story progresses and the gaps get filled in, you're back to the Dragon Age thing, where just because you've started it doesn't mean you're going to finish it, because eventually pieces fall into place, and at 10 hours, 15 hours at some point, you might realize that this character does not appeal to you, or you can relate to it. And I don't know between those two comparisons which is better. Do I look at Deus Ex and go, I don't really care for that, so I'm not even going to buy it? And then maybe I miss out on something. If I play Fire Emblem with the idea of, man, this thing's going to be anything, and then 15 hours in, I go, I've achieved an emotional reaction, probably being underwhelmed, if that's a thing, or I was never given a hook to really buy in. I tentatively bought in and played it until I realized it was nothing. And those things are why people are wishy-washy about things. Like, oh, I heard you got Fire Emblem. How was it? It's okay. Like, it's a game. It works. Your Xbox didn't catch fire, but that's the bare minimum. And it's the same thing with Dungeons and Dragons. After I play on a stream on Monday nights, and after I'm done, my wife will ask me, how was it? And, depending on how I'm feeling, how the session was, it was either, it was okay, which means everybody did their part. Nobody caught fire. Yeah. We played Dungeons and Dragons and it was fun, which is the bare minimum. I don't want to give this game up. I would like to play again. Yeah. And it's just this thing where on the days where things are crazy, it's, hey, how was your session? Oh man, baby, blah, blah, blah. And this, that, and the other. And from a place you were starting from is an emotional one. You felt this cool thing however long ago, and it was so cool that I would like to share it with my wife, my best friend. Yeah. And, she doesn't have context, but like I said, there's the difference, and she knows there's a difference. Maybe not why, but the difference between it was okay and me just blurting words at her for 20 minutes incoherently. There's an emotional thing in there. One of them made me feel something. I could be that excited about my character dying given a context. It was great. It was heroic. Or I get the opposite emotion. My character died. I'm sad.
Yeah.
And it could be either one of those, but I felt something, and that is what you could see in a reflection of when you ask me, how was your game? And I like that. And I feel like that is it's the key to anything. Movies, music, TV, everything is, you went to a concert, it was fine. They played music, they weren't out of tune, didn't make you feel anything, it was just there. And then you go to something you really enjoy, and there's a emotional connection. It could be any emotion, depending on the band, whatever. And that's what separates good from bad in anything. And in this space, like I said, I think everybody wants to do the cool thing. It's easy. Nobody wants to set up a campaign about exploring the emotional growth of their dwarf cleric. That's a byproduct of you playing this thing, but that emotional growth and the play on emotion, I think, is just as important as the meeting the NPCs and going on a quest and saving the dragon and getting loot. That's what makes it, just a bunch of people who just sit around. Yeah, I swing my sword. And all right, people are really into it. Standing up at the table.
Yes. Yeah.
These nonverbal cues, aside from somebody just going, man, that was really good. But, they stand up, or everybody's like watching the person whose turn it is to see how they roll.
They gasp.
Yeah, it's, I gamble. So I've seen people at a craps table for 30 minutes and listen to it, and just the highs and the lows. It's cool. I'm not even a part of it. And just watching those people have that time, it's great to see. And I can't control it, but in a Dungeons and Dragons game, I can. And I want to make sure that it's not just, oh, how was your session with Manny? It was okay, whatever. I want everybody to go back to their partners whoever asked them about it and say, man, blah, blah, blah. And it be so good, and their emotional attachment be such that they will explain something without any context to somebody who doesn't understand.
Yeah.
The emotion is so strong that they don't care whether you understand it. They just have to express it.
Yeah. And what's quite quaint is that my partner is, I feel like there should be a support group for DM partners who can, because
I'll put her in touch with my wife. If nothing else, it could just be the two of them.
Yeah. Because she also has to listen to me wax lyrical about, oh my God, I've got this planned, and they did this, and it was rad, and they don't know that I've got this other thing that's planned. And she just kind of sits there dutifully, just, I'm glad you're having fun.
Yep. Like I said, it's, across the pond, my house is exactly the same thing. She's very supportive, and I think she sees it, that we're in a pandemic. We don't get to do a lot of things. I go to work every day, and in this time, it's you have to find joy in anything, whatever it is that you want to do, find joy in it. And yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah, she goes to sleep while I'm writing until 1:00 in the morning, or doing God knows what inside my own head.
Yeah.
But, when she sees it, and when I'm done writing, or when I run something by her, she could tell that, like, I care about it. And to her, it's, I played pretend craps with, like, my friends over the internet. And that's the context for her. But the fact is that it makes me happy, and she sees how hard I work at it, and that she knows all my friends in my home game, and we used to get together. They would talk to her about it. Yeah. Like she was part of the group, because she's my wife. And I don't think she understands. She has a rough idea of how, D&D works, but to see, like, my friends talk about it, and when we're, at a cookout or something, talking about it, she, it must be important. And she enjoys that part of it, even if she doesn't understand how it works and everything.
Yeah. It speaks for itself in a way. And one thing you mentioned there about rolling dice and at the table, and I hit this thing. Okay, great, I hit it, move on. That's one thing that I really want to... The D&D can be its own beast, this special magical beast that can have these special responses, even in combat. So when you distill combat down, you could just plug the numbers in an Excel spreadsheet, press run encounter, come out the other side, and have it roll all the dice behind the scenes and go, okay, sorry players, you come out the other side and you took 4 points of damage and you took 3 points of damage. Because the combat can just be dice rolling against each other, which is, no one wants to see just dice roll. Like, that's boring, especially when it's the DM rolling against himself. That's super boring. So what's really good is to have those emotive moments of, okay, I swing my greatsword at this gelatinous cube. And then as a DM, I'm always like, tell me how, man. Like, this is great. Tell me, are you going to cut it in twain? Are you going to smush it into the ground? Like, really try and amp the crowd in a way to get people invested and to get people talking about it and those epic combat encounters. Because I could bet you that no one remembers a combat encounter in Dragon Age with some mooks on the road.
Yeah, and you pause and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel combat is one, at least from my experience with my home group, one of the first places that I felt like the new players really began to role play.
Wow. Okay.
It's just, I feel like whether you've imagined yourself as a wizard in Waterdeep solving a crime, everybody has imagined or physically played out swinging a sword with a tree branch or whatever. And depending on what motivated you to come to D&D in the first place, I think a lot of first timers maybe do come for the combat aspect of it. And if that's what you came for, when it actually happens, even if you don't understand your character's motivations or whatever, this is what you came to the game for. You wanted to smash things with a sword or hit things with a fireball. And the first time that, not the first time you do combat, because it is kind of stilted and odd, but once you understand at least your character's aspects of combat, then I always felt like they got into it because they didn't want to just swing a sword. This is what they came to the game for. So they are going to, flourishes, and suddenly everybody is Conan from guys that had still talked about their characters in the third person during social encounters. It's not, I did this. It was, and the first time I remember registering is I was like, wow, your first role play was really with combat.
Wow.
Because that's what they had come to the game for. That was their emotional draw. And when it presented themselves, that's what they were going to take advantage of. And it's cool because if you take a bunch of new timers, especially mixed in with a couple of real veterans that I have, the dichotomy between the two is pretty clear.
For sure.
Who's new and who's experienced. And it was the first time when I remember going, okay, they're going to be okay. This isn't going to be just it was fun for a little bit, but we got other things. One of them plays a cleric, one of them plays a dragonborn sorcerer. And so it was very much of like, sorcerer, your magic's innate. So it was very much kind of casual and almost flippant in the way that he would, light his hands up. And the cleric wanted to be the big bad protector. So, he was hitting things extra hard because he wanted to protect whatever. And whether they knew it or not, or whether they made the conscientious decision or not, this was their chance to do what they came to do, at least at first. And they got into it. And that's when I kind of realized that your emotional investment at the beginning of a campaign is not the same after 3 sessions, after 10 sessions, after 15. That you can come to it for one thing, get that itch scratched, and then go, wow, that was fun. There's a lot more to this. What are the other things? And then you just have to feel like some emotional itch other than I really like hanging out and drinking beers with my friends gets scratched. And if it's that you are really descriptive in your combat and maybe you landed the killing blow and I, as the dungeon master, get to say something like, all right, how do you finish it off? Which is, my verbal cue. And then some of them would just go into this just great description where you're just like, all right, man, cool. You can invest in this emotionally. Now let me see what else I can get you to bite on. And if nothing else, I would keep giving you scenarios where the one itch you can scratch that makes you happy or whatever it does to your your brain, I will give you that within a reasonable amount. But if that's what it takes on my end to keep you emotionally invested, or at least emotionally invested in this part until something else can hook you, that's what I'll do. I think it's just the basic responsibility of a dungeon master. Keep your players invested in whatever it is that they're invested in.
Mhm.
Like, it might not be the thing that's important to you, but if they're invested in something, you got to give it to them. You got to nurture them, nurture it, so that they'll keep playing and potentially grow or have these other things happen to them.
Yeah, something I probably need to spend a little bit more time thinking about myself. I have an ebb and flow to the campaign, so there'll be periods of traditional dungeon delving where there'll be lots more combat, for example, that kind of scratches that itch, but then there's a bit of the tide's going to wash out a little bit and it's going to calm down and you're going to go back to town and kind of collect your thoughts and have that opportunity to go and pray to gods or to visit the local homeless shelter and donate some of your earnings and that kind of stuff. And I probably need to pay a little bit more attention to the moment-to-moment plays of that to work out precisely which one of the 6 players is resonating with each one of those bits. Now, combat, it's easier to spot because it's quite clear to see when people get amped up with, we're rolling initiative. Okay, immediately I've perked up and I'm psyched. And it's like, okay, there's your trigger. Got that. Let me build up more of a preamble towards the next combat, for example. But for the more subtle things, I think it's a bit harder to, maybe just for myself, to extract that out of the players and be like, what makes you tick? Why do you keep coming back? There must be some reason, right? And perhaps I'm at the point where I just need to flat out ask them, why are you here, in the nicest possible way?
Yeah, like I said, are they friends of yours? Are you familiar with them? Or is this kind of a, let's get together and let's do this thing as the common element?
So they are all in my primary game colleagues from my place of work. So we'd been working together in varying levels of day-to-day office work for approximately about 2 years, some of which I was closer with than others, one of which is actually my line manager at work. So it's quite an interesting dynamic reversal when we start playing the game. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a small amount of guilty pleasure to be had there, but that's what's life without some guilty pleasures.
I totally I'm with you. Tormenting your boss.
Yes, yeah, and so about 2 years, give or take. So yeah, we've got there's this. It's definitely not going in ice cold, to say the least.
And like I said, my home group, I'm gonna find out what it's like to dungeon master for relative strangers here pretty soon. But like I said, I've known all of them for quite a long time. 2 of them actually were in my original campaign. So those guys were easy. I knew what made them tick. Whatever they gave me as far as their characters, I knew they were going to be invested in. I just had to do it. So they were good. The other guys, like I said, I used my knowledge of them in a familiar sense of like, hey, you're my friend Greg, to kind of weasel my way into their heads. And I feel like this is going to be like a psychological profile for like somebody at some point about like emotional manipulation. But I knew Greg the person. And so I realized his character was going to be Greg the sorcerer. It's a little easier. And I know the things that I could do to antagonize Greg or what he, the person, enjoys in life. And I didn't know for sure that Greg the sorcerer would buy into the same thing that Greg the chef does. But you give it a shot. And when they react the same way that the person would, you go, okay, these are the little things. And then I use those things. And I feel like that's an advantage of groups that are familiar with each other have.
For sure.
But it's a little harder in the, hey, I'm starting this game, everybody come and play, which I think in that situation, I think just asking them, I don't want to say like a business transaction, but it is kind of a formal arrangement, especially when you get into people you don't know as your friends, that I think setting expectations from, me and then for the players to give them their best experience. What are you here for? And if you're here, you like smashing stuff with a sword, cool. Cheers. I got you. If you want some big emotional story arc, also great. I love that. You tell me, give me as much or as little as you want, and I will work just as hard to fit your personal little thing into this big campaign
Yeah.
as I did with the campaign as a whole, because the two are intertwined. And yes, killing the giants at the end of Storm King's Thunder is probably going to be cool.
Yes.
I don't believe, and I don't want that to be the thing that my friends talk about when they tell the story about our Dungeons and Dragons campaign. I don't want them to be excited or tell other people about the stuff that Chris Perkins wrote for Wizards of the Coast. When they tell the story, I want it to be, oh, Manny set me up for this thing and blah, blah, blah. And you should have seen what he did to Luke's character and how he messed him up emotionally. Those are the things that I want. And in order to get that, I have to work for it. And I enjoy it. You know, I'm adapting 2 published modules for my stream games, and mechanically, they're very good. I do not mess with the mechanics at all, mostly because I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to crunch numbers. I don't want to do spreadsheets. If this is what it is, then fine. I will bend the narrative of the module itself or the little niche within the overarching narrative for, you know, one of my players' characters. And that's the enjoyment out of it for me. And when prep gets tedious or, you know, you just stare at a blank screen, it's not that I don't have any ideas. It's that I'm worried that my players are not going to be emotionally invested like I want them to be.
Yes.
And are they going to have a good time slaying the giants? Yeah, probably. They're big. You know, they're level 11 now. So they've been with these characters for a while. And their triumphs are the players' triumphs. And that's great. Yay, we did the thing. We killed the giants or whatever.
Yeah.
But like I said, the idea is that I don't want that to be their takeaway. I don't remember.
Yeah, for sure.
Because at the end of every module, you slayed whatever the bad was, probably. If you didn't, then your emotional attachment to it is the fact that you did not succeed. And that's what you talk about. And that comes from a place of you spend all this time on a module and a character and however many months. And at the end, you did not succeed. And disappointment, you know, like a healthy kind. It's you know, getting to find out the bad guy wins sometimes is a reward in and of itself.
It's closure either way in of itself is something that we were all after. And I think, as I said in the previous session, that you can then use that as a springboard for chapter 2, campaign 2, what happens when the bad guy wins kind of thing. When we used to play in brighter days, when we used to play in person still.
I remember those days.
Yeah, way back when. There'd be 7 of us sat around the table, and a couple of memories have been crystallized in my brain of... We used to play on one of the guys' house. He had a huge table in the conservatory. And, you know, as I said, we're all colleagues, so we all kind of like, when's everyone finishing today? Let's clock off together. Let's drive to this guy's house, rock up. We'd play from, say, 6 till maybe as late as, you know, 11 at some point on a school night. And some of my memories are just me, you know, that's where we'll end the session, packing up, saying goodbye to everybody, hopping in the car, driving home for 10 minutes, just wired from the session, just like running on adrenaline at like 11:15 at night when I've got work in, you know, 7 hours or something. And I'm just like buzzing as I'm driving down an empty motorway. It's just this crystal image of music probably a bit too loud, you know, wired to the brim of, oh, I can't believe that's happened, and ooh, what do I have to do now? And oh, I can think about this, and oh, maybe if I come at it from that angle, and oh, they're gonna love it if this thing happens.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of a session, oddly enough, is when it's over and everybody kind of drops the curtain on that dual dynamic of them and then their character. You know, once I go, okay, that's where we're going to leave it for a day, everybody's characters kind of stomp and they go back to being my friends, packing up their bags and, you know, getting ready to go. And that's when, you know, everybody kind of drops the illusion and we're back to being a group of friends. And like I said, I don't get to participate in their conversations the same way that they do. But sitting there listening to Greg talk to Lewis about how this session went and how much fun they had, those are the things that get me. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I get my quiet little bit of reflection, and then I used to have to drive 45 minutes home
Wow.
from where I played. And it was a very cool kind of solitary drive.
Mm-hmm.
I can't talk to
Yeah.
them about the end of the session because I'm the dungeon master. I drive 45
Yep.
minutes home, and then my poor wife has to hear it when I come through the door and just blurt words at her. And she was like, have you been like this for the entire drive home? And I was like, well, it's actually worse because I don't have anybody to talk to. So I've just been seething for 45 minutes, and you were the first person. And, like I said, that comes from the emotional investment. It's a lot of work to go play Dungeons and Dragons in person.
Yes, for sure.
It just is.
A couple of my players, they lived in the complete opposite directions. They were traveling up to an hour. Actually, at that time of night, it was a lot quicker. It's about 45 minutes. But yeah, so if we're finishing at 11, they're not getting home until quarter to midnight. But it's that, as you said, it's that emotional investment, and they're willing to do that because Dan Lowe's got some goofy idea tonight.
Yeah. And it's a weird thing because, like I said, you're the dungeon master. The perception is that you are in control. Mm-hmm. And part of the deal of being a player is, this is where we're going to get into the psychological profile stuff, is submitting to the will of the dungeon master within the confines of the game.
Yeah.
That you've created this character you're invested in, that I'd like to believe you care very deeply for, that they trust with you to fulfill whatever emotional need that character represents for them. Is it redemption after a failure? Is it vengeance against, dead parents? But you are the means for them to achieve it. And it's not like a huge responsibility. It's not letting somebody watch your kid. But within the confines of this game, you have this very personal thing, your character, that you are specifically emotionally invested in. And you turn its fate over for 3-4 hours at a time to a willing person who there has to be some trust and some back and forth dynamic established with. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the 3 hours, here's your character back, and we'll do this again, next week. And to keep showing up week after week with this character who you love, who for the 3 hours where they exist in a world of consequence and other things, and then to take it back and go, man, I survived. And then to show up again next week. All right, man, that was great. Please don't kill him again, but I'm probably not going to be mad at you if you do. It's a weird kind of emotional dynamic between two people. I trust you with this imaginary thing that means the world to me, and I'm going to do it over and over again. And part of that is the idea that your thing might die. And, like, hey, man, I'm sorry. If it's a pet, I need you to watch my pet. And you let somebody's cat run out the door. Yeah. You're a horrible person. Mm-hmm. And rightly so. In this, granted, it's not a tangible, real thing, but people could be invested in it just the same way. And they could give it to you at 4:00 in the afternoon, and by 6:30 you've killed it, and they watched you do it.
Yep.
And they'd be like, hey man, I hope you had fun. And when you explain it like that, it's a weird idea.
It is. Oh man, yeah. When you put it like that, it is super. If you went to new players and explained the game to them in that way, I think there'd be a lot less new players. Just because of that weird dynamic. But it ties back into what we were talking about earlier on about the trust of the DM, and how I was saying, like, it's a piece of cake to kill the players, but the players are trusting the DM not to do that arbitrarily, not to just be like, a dragon comes out of the sky and blasts 20 d6 at you, fire breath, just because that would be a laugh. So it is that weird kind of like, okay, we're in the same boat together, and we're kind of going in the same direction, except one of you is kind of occasionally rocking the boat as the DM. Maybe that's a bit of a strained metaphor, but it kind of made more sense in my head.
And it's not even like accidentally rocking the boat. It's in essence rocking the boat as part of my deal of being a passenger on this thing. We're all passengers together. My responsibility is different, and my responsibility is to place adversity in front of you and see how you react. So I'm going to rock this boat just because I want to see what you guys do about it. Like I said, when you explain it like that, yeah, it's a weird dynamic when you boil it down to its very basics. And getting ready for this, I was wondering, I was like, well, you're going to talk about emotion. Well, that's an awesome thing. And then it's also, well, shouldn't everybody have kind of an emotional investment or take in this thing, dungeon master or player? And is this kind of subject unnecessary? Everybody's like, oh yeah, Manny, be emotionally invested. Thanks, bro. That was a good hour listen. And I feel like I haven't seen anybody discuss this. And then when you get to things like Wizards of the Coast, their publications, all their job is about doing the thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to get emotionally invested. It's almost back to the video game analogy.
Yeah.
Where
for sure.
This is why the character needs to care about this thing. And all right, man, cool. I need to destroy the curse in Icewind Dale so it's not dark for 2 years. Okay, that's the thing. Why are you going to do it? Why do you care?
Yeah, I think if I'm being honest, it's probably one of the reasons why I have not played too many of the published modules. You've probably answered the question that I haven't been brave enough to ask myself, which is because I'm not a fan maybe of that implicit attachment. It's that you have to care about Icewind Dale because we're playing it, rather than, I guess what I like more is make something you care about because you want to care about it, and make them have an objective that I can tie into the wider objective, and then everybody wins. No one's had to pander to a published adventure, which makes it sound really harsh and makes it sound like I hate them, and I'm talking from ignorance here, so please take that with a pinch of salt, of course. But
I think it's just one of the things that's inherent about Wizards, and we go back to the Fire Emblem thing, is that they want to make it as appealing to everybody because, at my most cynical, they want you to buy their product. And if you get too specific, then we get into the Deus Ex thing. If the story of Rime of the Frost Maiden is told from the perspective of somebody who lives in Icewind Dale and they're going to save their homeland, your niche is too small. For somebody who wants to play, Wolfgar from the Salvatore novels, they're perfect. Like, if that's your thing, that's your cyberpunk, cool haircut, cool sunglasses aesthetic, and you're in. Wizards has to go the opposite way. They have to make it so that anybody could possibly want to do this. And so when I adapt modules, I basically just keep the mechanics, the encounters, the locations. Like I said, it's mostly stuff I don't want to mess with. Even down to the beginning plot hooks. If I have to, I took the narrative for Dragon Heist completely apart, kept maybe 20% of it. Wow. I could not get my group to believe in this idea as it was written for them to become emotionally invested. And if I just ran it as it was written, there's a reward, some money's missing, blah, blah, blah. It's not cool enough for everybody to pretend to be Ocean's 11. Yeah. So it's got to be more of your standard fantasy trope. I need you to be invested about why you care. And because they were new players, I made it about money. It was just the easiest one. Everybody wants it. You're level 1. You probably have your eye on something level 3, 4. You need money. Make it about money. And that's the beginning. And Rime of the Frostmaiden is the same thing. The curse has been going on for 2 years. So the idea that somebody, a level 1 adventurer, is going to suddenly decide after 2 years, you know what? I've had enough of this. I'm going to march up to Icewind Dale and I'm going to do something about it. Yeah. It's impossible. And basically that's where Wizards want you to begin with. My level 1 adventurer, after 2 years, finally says, I can't take this anymore. I'm going to go do something about it.
I'm going to start casting spells.
Yeah. I learned, I got a couple of cantrips. I'm ready to go. 2 years. I got this. And those things are hard. And it's a little preposterous when you really think about it. Yeah. So I was back to, okay, how do I get people to care about this in order to do the thing? You could just say, all right, we're going to play this game. We're playing Rime of the Frostmaiden. We're going to go do the thing. All right. Nobody's invested. Nobody cares. It's just, you're doing it because that's what it says for you to do. Yeah, sure. So you take it apart, and like I said, I look for emotional moments. I I don't know that I judge things by like the mechanics of it. I appreciate them, but I don't go, I'm going to use this because mechanically it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you just find, all right, what emotional things could bring anybody to Icewind Dale to deal with this? Money's always the first one. You wait for, my group to get figured out who's going to play. And then the next thing is character backstory. Is there a nugget in your backstory that would make you go up there?
Yeah.
And if there is, great. That's a little less work. And if not, I'll create one. I need you to be patient and understand that I've done the work. Your weird little payoff that you don't know what you want, it's coming. You just have to stick with me until you get there. But ideally, I hope it will be worth it.
Yeah.
And, when you go back to asking them what they want, that's part of it too, is that before this game gets set, what do you guys want out of this? Do you want survival horror, John Carpenter's The Thing, 30 Days of Night? Okay, cool. We could do that. Do you want the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones? Not a lot of things going on, but the emotional turmoil of all the seasons added up on the characters. Do you want that? And whatever it is, like I said, find out what they want and give it to them. It's that simple. And you can give them Smashing Dragons, but everybody has that. Give them the thing that they may not be able to express that they want, but is going to make them come back, make them feel something. Go, man, that was cool. Or, man, this place really sucks. I feel for these people. I can't let them live like this. Whatever it is, feel something and let that be your driving force.
Or do what I've stupidly done and just have a campaign so vast and big that it just incidentally covers every conceivable notion of heists, of gritty realism, of body horror, of goofy, whimsical adventures in the Fae, and just never see it finished because it will take 5 years to get through.
And, that's on your end, just, kind of covering all your bases. If everybody's in for like the big meta experience and that all of these things are very Dungeons and Dragons, the heist, the chase. And if you're into a bigger experience, then this will scratch all those itches, even if your character's background is vengeance for, dead parents or whatever.
Yeah.
There are other emotional itches that you don't know you need scratched that will get scratched along the way. And finding those things and presenting as many options as they can, I think it's good dungeon mastering. Is it efficient dungeon mastering? No, because you're going to write a ton of stuff that they're never going to come across. And that's just the byproduct. And it's hard. It is. It's hard, man. I'm not going to lie. It sucks. I worked really hard on this thing. You guys are never going to see. Well, let's see it. No, because I'm going to save it for somebody else who will see it.
That indignancy of the DM sounds like a good title for a book or a podcast or something.
Yeah. I said, good day, sir. And it's like I said, from the meta dungeon master concept, I love it. I think it's great that you are giving this effort to, like I said, scratch whatever itch they need scratched, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
I did an auction once for magic items that I didn't want like a magic store. I think they're cliche. So I did magic items and I found a thing on DM's Guild about mechanics for an auction. And I did an auction. I hate shopping. I don't want them to just wander around magic store and just buy whatever they want with the assumption that it's there. So I pulled a list of a couple of magic items. I knew the math. They didn't have enough for everything. So they had to pick and choose. And just like with a regular auction, I printed them out a little catalog, little picture art from the from the DMG, and I gave it to him, and I was like, all right, here's your auction catalog. Here's everything that it does. Descriptions were straight out of the Dungeon Master's Guide, and you get this thing. You're like, all right, we're going shopping, and all they think is they're going to do is just, I spend $3,000, I get this thing. No.
Yeah.
And then now it's this competitive thing because one of the mechanics is that there is people bidding against you. And so it's not just, oh, here's a catalog. These are the things we can get. I want this. You take that. There was also the added kind of stress of, hey, you could want this all you want. If this dice mechanic for a competing bidder just rolls higher than you, you're not going to get it. You thought 10 minutes ago that this was going to be a cakewalk. I'm going to get these boots of elven speed and be done. Sorry, man, you were outbid. And it was fun. They only got outbid on one thing, I think. But it, like I said, it turned a shopping trip into like a bit of competition. They, you know, and then there's the anxiety of, man, I really wanted this thing. And now, you know, I keep rolling 4s. And because of that, I don't get this thing. And when they do win the bid, you know, everybody's really excited, just like at a real auction. When they lost the bid, they were genuinely upset. And it was this way of injecting. And like I said, I had no idea it was going to turn into this. I just didn't want to do shopping. Yeah. But as a happy coincidence, it turned into this really kind of emotional day. And I'm almost positive the whole session was the auction, that they were just into it. And I thought that they were at some point just going to make little paddles, so that me sitting across the table from them, they were going to, you know, hold up a paddle like they were bidding at Christie's or whatever. And it was cool. It was this accidental, like little odd thing that I thought would be fun in an auction. And it turned into this really cool thing that they enjoyed, that as long as I've known them, if you'd asked me ahead of time, hey, are you guys really going to enjoy this auction? I'd have been like, no, they're going to breeze through it, get their stuff, and then be on their way. And it was cool. They didn't know they wanted an auction. They didn't know competitive bidding in Dungeons and Dragons was going to be fun. But it worked out. And, you know, when you talk about all the things that you've written that they might not ever see, but when they do see it, and like I said, the auction thing was a throwaway. And they loved it. You're like, all right, man, this is my incentive to maybe push your expectations a little more and get me out of this kind of go here, do this thing, go back to here, bigger problem. That components that are just as important to them, or, you know, mean as much to them, can be these odd little side ideas.
I have to say, great minds, because it's weird how worlds collide, because I also did an auction a little while ago, funnily enough. Similar reasoning, in that I like to subvert expectations. Similar kind of thing of, you know, I didn't want it just to be an item shop. And it was part of a masquerade ball, or, you know, like a philanthropist's house party kind of thing. So it's like a ding, ding, ding. We're going to do the auction now. Can everyone make your way to the West Wing and we'll do the auction? And it was a bit of more of a fanciful affair of local celebrities and dignitaries voting. But the gimmick for mine was that the items were all the aesthetic items from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So all the ones which are ostensibly magic, but are just for show in a way. So the gleaming armor that can't get dirty, the cane that turns into a sword.
I think there's like a pair of pants that looks like they're on fire.
Yeah. It's bits and bobs like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, nice to have. And I foolishly did not stand on the shoulders of giants and just tried to make my own headcanon up of how this person is going to bid and who they're bidding against and stuff. And I think 2 items were bought in the end. It was the armor of gleaming and the wand of conducting, where you can, it's a bit like a Wind Waker, where you can just wave the wand and music starts playing.
Nice.
Yeah, which was a nice touch. Hell for me to do an auction on the fly, because I'm an idiot and didn't prepare and copy from those who are better than it. Yeah, I think so. I think it might be my I don't want to say problem, but my challenge is 6 players with potentially quite unaligned desires. So we have the whole gamut from maths. I've multi-classed here because that gives me plus X here, which means that I can do Y a lot better in this certain situation.
I get 1 more language and 1 more proficiency.
Yeah, that makes me happy that I've chiseled this character to be this efficient killing machine, all the way up to a warlock who made a 1.5 page backstory with time skips and ties into their patrons, and we've talked before about his home life and where his family live on the world map after I'd provided it with them and stuff, and he's into it for a lot more of the juicy kind of inter-party relationships and friction, whereas you've got that other player who basically doesn't give him any of that because he's very stoic and like, I go here, I do this. But eventually, and you'd like to hope that this would be the case after about 45 sessions or so, everyone's slowly starting to smush together, and those lines of min-maxer versus RPer are starting to blur and cross, which is great. That's what I'm after. That's perfect, because then that unlocks those emotional payoffs. It unlocks those, well, hey, that guy didn't save your life when you were fighting last time. Is that not infuriating? Like, he was going to let you die, man.
Like I said, I think, and it's also part of just how long your group's been together, that the kind of walls and everything fall. And, you know, your situation's very similar to mine with your group dynamic, is that everybody is at least familiar with each other. And whether you guys are super close in work, outside of work, the time spent together builds that bond amongst, if not the people who become more familiar with each other. We always sit next to each other during the game. And then that bleeds into the characters.
Yeah.
Or the opposite is you, the player, can make the conscientious decision for your character to make the effort to make the group a little more cohesive. And that's fine too. You know, any group project, anybody who works in a kind of collaborative field, eventually you're going to come across that one person who's just going to be like, all right, look, for this to work for everybody, we have to do, you know, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And that's totally fine. You know, not everybody has to kind of stumble through the dark to find everything. You know, we're adults. We're at this thing that is, you know, not the easiest to manage time for. So there's no reason for us to not be as efficient about it. And if, you know, one of the end goals is party cohesion, at least amongst the characters, then just unilaterally making the decision to work towards that is totally fine, because in a real world dynamic, that would absolutely happen. Somebody would just go, all right, let's go around the room. Let's meet each other real quick. We got to work together. Let's do this. And that's fine too. However, that goal of everybody blending together, the characters, at least the players, ideally, but at least the characters, is that you guys have to get on the same page and enjoy or do your thing while doing the collective. You get your little emotional bits while everybody's working towards this big thing. Some of you will all get emotional bits all at once. Some of you one at a time, couple, you know, two at a time, depending on where they overlap. But, and like I said, over time, that min-max, because my two experienced players, you know, they came in with optimized characters, which is fine. I don't like being bad at something that I'm trying to do as a diversion. That's why I don't play golf. I don't want to go out and be bad at something that's supposed to be fun. So if you want to come in with an optimized character, that's fine. You know what your character is going to do. You want to be good at it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And then the RPers are much more of they focus on the things that their character can't do well. And that's cool too. The group I play in has a grave cleric with a negative con modifier. Like you're the healer, and you're supposed to be the stout, hardy one, and like somehow you're the healer, but you're the fragile one, but still as a cleric. Wow. And then we also have a Warforged battle master, very stoic, who in the course of our role play together has become very defensive of the cleric for her role in the party as, you know, the healer, but also the character knowing that he's this automated metal thing, and she is a somewhat frail genasi, that his character's motivation is to be protective of her. And so they share this really cool kind of two-person role-playing dynamic that's very interesting. And it's cool to watch. I'm not a part of it. I don't have an emotional need being scratched right now, but watching the two of them do it, it's almost voyeuristic. Like I'm watching this thing that I'm a part of, but not really a part of. I'm in the party, I'm on screen, but this scene doesn't concern me. And that's captivating to me, even though I'm not doing anything with my player. Watching these genuinely well played out emotional exchanges is riveting, even though I'm not getting really anything emotionally out of it.
Yeah, for sure. Did you have anything specific you wanted to cover?
Just players, dungeon masters, just try to be, like I said, you know, we've basically hit on the same note all day. The more you're emotionally invested in this, and the more you care about the emotions of the other players and the characters and the dungeon master, like, they have emotional needs to be scratched too, even if they're somewhat sinister in presentation. That if there's anything with this kind of, I don't want to say resurgence of Dungeons and Dragons, but the idea of
a renaissance.
Yeah, it being where it is in its lifespan, that there's a whole new group of people that don't know about it and learn about it every day. And because of things like Critical Role or any, online stream game, it's a lot more than just rolling dice and killing dragons or wizards or whatever, that there is this space for more than just a tangible achievement. I killed the dragon. That, even if you're not an actor, you didn't do drama in high school or whatever, that there is a space for you. And the hardest part is to do the role play. The role play is hard. You're with your friends. You're going to do a voice. You're going to basically pretend as an adult.
Yeah.
It's a hard hurdle to get over. But once you are on the other side of it, the emotional thing that you receive from this game is just so much more. Once you've invested, I promise you, it will give you more back than whatever effort you put into your part of emotional investment.
For sure. A million times over. I agree with you. It's like a positive feedback loop. You keep putting more in and you keep getting more out, and everybody wins.
And it reaches critical mass, and then at some point it almost, even if you're not nurturing it every single day, you've given it enough that during a slow session, when, either narratively or just because of whatever, things don't happen. It's not like everything comes to a screeching halt. Well, that's it for my emotional investment. I'm out. It's if you give, as much as you can every day, for the days when you can't, the dungeon master can't, the group just seems flat, you still have enough pent up in you to know this is still great, even though this today wasn't everything I wanted it to be.
Yeah, just as in life, you have ups and you have downs, and that's the ride that we're on together. And it's that kind of group bonding experience that we've talked about before. And one thing that I want to end it on is, again, a little bit of an emotional roller coaster. Is we touched on it earlier on, of that kind of DM loneliness of sitting in your car, just like, God, I've got all these ideas, but I don't have anyone to talk to. And that's a pain I think every DM goes through at some point, because of course the people you want to talk to about it most are the ones you can't ever talk about it to, for lack of whipping the emotional rug out from under their feet and having there nothing to fall back on. So what I'm very happy to have found in yourself is a DM foil for me to bounce ideas off of. Perhaps next time I have an auction for for items, I know who I'm going to come and talk to.
Yeah, they always say shrinks have psychiatrists have psychiatrists that they can talk to, and it's not the same thing. But I always feel like a dungeon master should have like a dungeon master friend. Everybody has a concept of what it means to be a dungeon master, but until you do it, or that's what you kind of have carved your niche out, it is very lonely. And the only person that really understands dungeon master problems are other dungeon masters for a million reasons. And it's good to have one, or as many as you want. The more you widen your pool, the more ideas or the more collaboration or all these things that keep your emotional investment in the actual act of dungeon mastering that will then translate into your actual game with it. I think it's important. Like I say, it's just it's a lonely thing otherwise.
It's lonely at the top, as they say.
Heavy as the head.
All right, well, that's pretty much brought us to the end. So is there anything you would like to plug as you have the opportunity?
As of right now, I play Algernon Altano on Mysteries in the Dalelands, Monday night, 7:30 Eastern Time on the Wily Hobbit Twitch channel. And then coming in January, I will be dungeon mastering a Greyhawk campaign on Sunday afternoons on that same channel. And then also that same month, I will be bringing my rhyme of the Frostmaiden campaign to stream. So yes, I do have things to plug, and as soon as we're done with this, I'm going to go back to the anxiety of getting both of those ready.
Again, another emotion I know only too well.
Yes.
Awesome. Sunday afternoons, I am typically free, so I look forward to that in the new year. Otherwise, thank you ever so much. Your enthusiasm is infectious, and I think that a lot of people are going to listen to this and come out the other side and go, I want to go and play D&D now, which I couldn't think of a better outcome for an episode of the podcast. So
No.
Thank you ever so much.
Thanks for having me. This was like I said, it's a real cool thing that between this and your other episodes, I think that these topics, these big, obscure, kind of high-minded things, need a space for discussion. And the more people that listen to it and participate in it, I think it can only be good for everybody, if not just the people who hear it.
Thank you. That means a lot. If anyone has any comments or thoughts on today's episodes, or I don't know, you might say emotions, please drop me a tweet at danilo_DND. Otherwise, thank you all for listening, and good night.